It turns out there's a lot of differences between Back to Nature and its remake Friends of Mineral Town, which I'll be referring to as the remake to be faster. So I'm going to talk about every difference I can find in Back to Nature, and give it a point if I prefer that over the remake. That'll make it different from just any comparison video. Amount of points doesn't really matter because some points are a lot more important than others. In general, this game feels like a boring prototype to the remake, and that's mainly because of a few things. I couldn't get the original Back to Nature to work, so I'm playing the PSP port, where it's in widescreen and you can play as the girl who ends the game after marriage. And the boy can't get a response from the horse if he whistles. There's no super fast getting through text in this game. Holding A doesn't do nearly enough to speed it up, and you can't zip through it using the control pad. That makes talking to anybody boring, and that's a lot of the game. The events aren't identical to each other. It's not like the script is the same. It's just a matter of opinion which one is the better events. I hate the movement controls in this game because you can only move in diagonal directions, and you can't change the camera and walk around normally. It makes farming less enjoyable because it feels more likely that I'll mess it up. Any controls for this game that aren't Type 2 are unbearable. They just don't have the character respond to my control stick how I'd expect. These are the worst controls I've ever seen. If I didn't love the idea of this series, I would have given up the game because of this. I can't find an option to make the run button the walk button. Every time you use the TV, it reminds you of the controls first. One of the many reasons this game's pacing is worse. Tool upgrading is nicer because apparently you can mash the tool button without fainting as soon as you first gain control of your character until every tool is ready for the mystery lore. You can't do this with a watering can because it's not full of water though. Apparently you can do it on the second day as long as you filled it up with water. This is great for the gameplay experience for the rest of the game after that point. But it's insanely boring going through this. Only drawback to doing this is having to go to the hot spring first thing in the morning. But it's a less amount of time spent being bored than the amount of time you'd go through while playing normally using every tool in their GIMP forms until they level it up. You can get the best tools faster in a far less boring way in both games by using codes. Why can't I get the goddess minigame on the TV? I love getting herbs from it by answering wrong in the remake. It would really suck if there was another remake where you couldn't do that. It's only a small amount of money, but anything that would have gotten you the best rucksack earlier is better. There's less detail in general in the subscreens. The most noticeable difference is you can't see the experience bars of the harvest sprites. So at first you'll think, so their efficiency is based on their affection, right? Nope. Other than that, I don't notice a difference. Every subscreen I love is still there. Another symptom of less detail is that you can't see your entire farm complete with what was watered either. No honey from your farm's tree for most of the game. Foraging can be annoying sometimes. It's so finicky picking up stuff sometimes. To put away stuff, I have to press the rucksack button and manually put it into the bank. It's also hard to get used to that you can't exit the rucksack via the button you went into it. Instead, that button shows you the description of items. At least it's more comfortable that you have one button to go into the rucksack, not two at once. Another thing I noticed is that you can't get out an item with the button combination and then hold down a shoulder button and use a control pad to switch between the items. Doing that when you're not indoors wastes time on you. But it would make using the makers less annoying. But by the point that you buy the makers, you don't need them anymore. So it doesn't even matter. Sometimes you stop running for no reason in the forest. No branches to chop in the woods, which is padding out how long it takes to get every building expansion. You want branches? You're gonna have to fish for them. Behold, the utter lack of stuff to forage in the lake area. saves me time only after the first time I went there for nothing. And there is stuff to forage there in the fall. But by that point, I had the mystery lens, so I was going there for a stump anyways. There's less stuff to forage every day in general. The level design's slightly different in a way that barely matters. It takes seconds longer to get to the end because there isn't a road connecting it to the screen with a blacksmith for no reason, which also has the winery right beside it. Jeff talks for a million years telling you about stuff before you buy them that day. Every time. And if you choose not to buy an ingredient, he talks a lot about that too. You have to buy ingredients at the market, like the flour to befriend the harvest sprites, one at a time. You can't send something to your fridge. And there's more sprites than spaces in your rucksack for the longest time. Enjoy making multiple trips to the sprites. And because you hold something after you buy it, it also means that you can't buy something when you're holding something. You'll just throw it and litter it. To get something wrapped, you have to remember to be carrying that item while in front of the wrapping section that's in a different place in this game. This means there's pressure to stand in just the right spot so you wouldn't litter with the item instead of wrap it. And every time you forget you have to be holding the item, your time's wasted because Jeff still talks to you. There's events I don't recognize in this game, which is refreshing. Both games get a point because the remake retranslates the game and has events of its own. I won't talk about most of them because there's nothing to say about them that isn't stating the obvious. The buildings at the beach are just for decoration. That's so baffling. The game must have been rushed. That saves you time going into them. But what really is disappointing is the lack of stuff to forage at the beach. The map's useless, giving no hint about where one's shop is. There's nothing I can do to get the GBA button combinations. The game has its own button combinations for that stuff, but you can't remap the controls in the emulator to make them identical to the GBA game. Because it would require me to not have mapped to the A button the actions that should be on the A button. There's no reading the books in the library, so no way to find out some of the more unintuitive information or stuff you would have found on your own later that you could have benefited from learning earlier. The water can seems to hold more water right from the start, at a max of 100 water units. The game's inferior in so many other ways that I don't get a chance to appreciate it. I'm too busy worrying about the fact that it's actually possible to throw away something instead of going to the coop or shipping its bin. Days are half as long in the remake, apparently. It sounds like the game is worse pacing. The watering can only loses water when you water on a soil tile. This means you don't have to constantly refill it when you're using it in the mine trying to upgrade it. Stamina is more of a challenge, apparently. In the remake, you start out with more of it, and power bear is only boosted by a measly 5 to balance it. I never noticed a difference. But it is in the game, so you'll make less money per day because of it. Your character's face doesn't turn blue. There's so many times he fainted despite the fact that I didn't think he did his last animation. It's most likely that I didn't notice or forgot it because it ends so fast. Running out of energy sneaks up on you. It sucks because every time I faint, I reload my file to avoid losing a day. This is a massive downgrade compared to the previous games. You don't need to take the effort of getting a hammer out to go mining, so you naturally get ores in the process of doing what you have to do to get to the next floor. And it should go without saying, but it's not like the mining is ridiculously slow paced like in 64. When you get an item, you don't have to sit through a text box telling you what it is. It's bad enough that because you can stay up past midnight in these games, you have more time than before for making money. And because of the hot spring, you never need to sleep. It would have felt better if days did end at midnight so I'd get through the seasons faster. Wild animals in the forest can be picked up and brought wherever you want. That can be a nice feeling extra detail, but it just wastes your time doing that without benefiting you. It's not like they always stay in your house anyways, so you can't adopt one as a pet. One only sells you one type of apple. You don't need them to complete the shipping list. The shipping list is way more generous, with way less things to ship, so there's less they have to do. It doesn't even count golden products as separate from the regular ones. You'll have no way of knowing this, so you're still gonna buy it the first time just to ship it. Why can't I hire the sprites at 3 hearts? All he does is remind me there's a tea party in spring. And they think that's an excuse not to work when it only lasts a few minutes. I looked it up, and it turns out if you talk to a sprite in the spring 4 times, he will let you hire him. How are you supposed to know that? Why put us through this then? I spent most of the first spring not hiring any of them. Why wouldn't they do this in the summer? The game doesn't even get saving right. And not just because you can't save without going to bed. It's based on a port of 64. So it could have easily done what it did and saved as soon as you chose to go to bed. Instead, it takes forever. You have to choose yes to save. It's so much faster to just sleep without saving. In my experience, I have to use the D-pad to get to yes, or it won't work. You can't change your aim with tools. The mines have a small 10 floors, which means multiple times a day you'll reach the bottom and have to leave the mine and go through 5 floors of it to get to the floors with the good stuff again. You'll probably get your basket and bag filled by the time you get to the bottom. Fishing rod retrieval is obtuse. You need to wait until a Friday or weekend, and go to the beach between either version of between 7 and 10 o'clock, and talk to the guy at the dock. It's not good enough to simply talk to everyone on the first day and happen to get it, which some people would do naturally. You need a guide. This doesn't matter because you can get enough money to buy everything by the start of the first fall despite barely fishing. As long as you mine as much as possible. Fishing isn't profitable enough for it to matter. At least you can get big fish with your first ever fishing rod. But that's cancelled out and then some by the much bigger amount of trash the rod gets, mainly in the sea and river. Fish can be bred in the farm's pond, and if you feed your fish long enough, every single one of them will be a big fish. That's pointless when you can simply fish and get fish fast. But it just has to require buying food for the fish to feed them, because otherwise they aren't going to reproduce and grow in the first place. When they could have easily had the pond already contained stuff for them to eat naturally. So that's even more of your time taken up. But compared to Story of Seasons, at least the gameplay for this is actually playable. You don't have the risk of losing all of your fish at random. Compared to that game, this is actually fun. I suppose it would be nice to have an extra source of money early game, because you can make fish become bigger. I waited until the second year to bother with this. That's because of how terrible fishing is. Fishing requires you to hold down the button the whole time like it's 64. So that's a bit painful. You're more used to pressing a button when you have to react to something quickly. So having to release it slows down your reaction time so much that I barely catch anything. I only catch a fish a fourth of the time. Both games have you fish up a power berry from the dock. I'm glad you don't need a Misrio rod to get it and back to nature. But it's only in spring or winter, so you'll never get it before winter. Considering how few stamina the power berries increase on you, it's not worth it. Knowing I could get it in spring made me waste time failing to get it. I didn't do it on my first playthrough, but imagine if you did that instead of mining. I won't bother mentioning that Back to Nature excludes the power berries that don't suck. The controls are just a nitpick. What really ruins fishing, aside from how long it takes to get a bite, because that completely ruins it from the previous games. What really ruins fishing though is that you can't throw away items from the menu, when your bag is going to be filled with garbage every time. And heaven forbid you be able to ship garbage with your basket. When it's bad enough, this is the first game where the garbage doesn't vanish when you get it. So fishing at the ocean's ruined because you get nothing but trash. Fishing doesn't waste your time telling you which fish species you caught. You don't have a text box every time you catch something. But every time I fish, I'm so focused on how much harder it is to actually catch a fish that I can't care about this. It's cancelled out by the fact that you can only press the button in time a fourth of the time. It's so bad that even slowing down the game's speed by half doesn't change the fact that you fail at it over half the time. So fishing is even worse than it was in 64. TV shopping isn't available until after you upgrade your house. Kappa gives you what you want after throwing 3 cucumbers in a row on the same day. So he's awesome if you know what to do. But he's confusing if you're used to the remake, because you have to throw the cucumbers into a very specific part of the lake afternoon on a sunny day that isn't a festival. You have to know to do your foraging later in the day than normal. If you played this game first, you'd only know about Kappa from a guide, which would be the same place where you'd find out all of this. So this wouldn't be a problem. Power berries are gone differently in this game. Reading about this is the main reason I even played this game. But they're usually gone the same way gameplay-wise anyways, by pressing A or the tool button, some of them more times than others. So it doesn't really matter except with the power berries that you'll hate to get. In the remake, only 2 of the power berries are horrible to get. In this game, 4 of them suck. And you can get the basket stuck to the right of the coop door, and when you go into the coop, the basket vanishes. And this is a big deal because it happened to me multiple times. A power berry is tied to throwing 5 crops in the goddess pond. This is the kind of thing you do only once out of curiosity because she's called a harvest goddess. But I stopped it after the first time in the remake because she doesn't say anything different from what she says about flowers. And 5 whole crops is mean when the first season you're the most desperate for money. But since she is called a harvest goddess, you might not get the idea that she would want flowers. I just happened to use them as offerings to see if I could get away with it because they were there. And you can't ship them. And some players would assume that continuously giving offerings to the goddess of the land would have a reward. So it isn't really obtuse. What is obtuse is that you have to throw the offering behind the waterfall for it to count, and give the offering after 5 PM on a Sunday, and that you can throw in all of the crops in a row for the berry. She still should have said she'd reward you if you do this enough. I'm assuming the manual tells her that you can summon her. But if it doesn't, that's another way the power berry is 5 times more cruel than the remake, where you can throw flowers into the pond for it, and you just need to do it more times. So it's way more effort and boredom, but at least you're not sacrificing profit. I want to say the gameplay experience of getting this one is bad, because it's so easy and quick to do. You can waste something by throwing it into a full basket. The game wastes your time at the blacksmiths, because you have to equip the tool to upgrade it, and talk to him while holding the ore. And if you naturally don't know that, he'll tell you what you need to do first. The Harvest Sprite Hut is locked on festivals. The blacksmith sucks because if your rucksack doesn't have a free tool slot, you won't get the upgraded tool given to you until you come back with an empty space. And instead of waste your time telling you he won't help you. And he'll also do that if you're holding something, even though you need to hold something to upgrade a tool. So he'd be doing that the first time. You're better off buying the basket before the rucksack upgrade, so this is going to happen to you. On the bright side, the blacksmith lets you go into it and get your tool on a Thursday. That's not the case in the remake. I was really grateful for this. It's especially great when that tool is your watering can and your sprites aren't working that day. But I only discovered this out of desperation. Most people aren't going to know this. If you wait 3 seconds after charging up a tool, you stop charging, and you do an animation that apparently doesn't mean that you lost stamina, which only a guide would tell you. That occasionally happens to me. especially since charging to max takes so long that I end up holding fast forward on it. Why can't you just have one tool upgrade that's super awesome like in the earlier games? In that sense, the tool upgrade system is a massive downgrade. A few villagers didn't make it to the remake. That's a shame, but I don't care because they've got no personalities. The only one that matters is Lewis. Kano just annoys people because he looks like a handsome bachelor, but you can't marry him. So you have to assume he's gay or something. Juan's shop is not on the beach. It's in the inn. And the game never tells you that. So I had to look it up since I didn't find it all spring. In the remake, it's as far away as possible from your farm. Well, it's closer to it here. I wish the shop was open earlier than 11 in the remake. In Back to Nature, it's even worse. His shop is only open between 1 and 4 o'clock. When you think about it, it makes a lot more sense that his shop's in the inn. Because why would Zach take him in as a roommate anyways? So why would you ever think that his shop's at the beach? It makes sense that as a guest to the town, he'd be staying at the inn. I just wouldn't expect him to have his shop at the inn. Not that it really matters, because he'll never grow them anyways, but you have to complete a special event for Juan to sell you moondrop seeds. Which means you need a guide. Kai smirks a lot. He's less likable in this game. Because his building's just for decoration, you can only give him gifts when he's outside, and yet still inexplicably sells you food. It's faster that you have to talk to him outside. Furniture's gotten faster. You don't have to individually buy the fridge, kitchen, shelf, and carpet. They'll be at your house when you upgrade it for the first time. The big bed comes with a second house upgrade. This means I could propose successfully on the same day the winery job was offered. Once you upgrade the house, the inside of it looks a lot nicer in this game. This is the first game to have an intuitive way of telling you how many power berries you have. Because you just look at them on the menu. So it's not like the flowers in your house serve that purpose. You don't have to buy the mirror, in that it comes with a second house upgrade. The mirror is a pointless waste of money that makes it take longer to get married because you have to buy it first. According to TV tropes, you can get stuck in an endless loading screen if you don't upgrade your house to second level once you leave it at the start of the first summer. How is anyone supposed to avoid that? This never happened to me. And I hate that I don't know for sure if it's because it's random or because I was playing the PSP version, where the only difference that matters is that there isn't terrible load times from the PS1. The whole reason I took so long to make this review was because I was mining, because the knowledge of this glitch gave me extra pressure to make as much money as possible. TV Tropes was the only place I've seen this glitch be mentioned. If this glitch is just a lie, someone needs to get that off of there, because knowing about it is ruining the gameplay experience of every new player. This is the same page that didn't edit the above entry to say that the later European versions of the game do not crash after your marriage. Even expecting you to have upgraded to first level would be completely unrealistic, because achieving that requires you to play in an unnatural way by not buying things anyone would plan to get first to increase your daily profits and make the game less tedious. What pads out fully upgrading the house is not only the usual garbage from the remake, that if you spend too long without giving Gons a gift, he'll refuse to help you for the day until you bribe him enough. But in this game, you need to expand the coop and barn before you're allowed to get both house expansions. I wish I knew for sure if this glitch was in the boy and girl version. If it isn't, I'd say don't bother mining. Because it destroys the pacing of the game since time's frozen and makes it really boring because it becomes 99% mining. And the unrealistic way mining is handled makes it unimmersive. Mining and ranching are both unnecessary because of how much money you'll make farming. When I first buy a chicken, no matter what, it takes 2 days for it to lay an egg. I know it's unavoidable now, because even the second time I bought a chicken just to get the recipes, this still happened. So it's not like it's because I put the feed in the wrong tray. This makes it impossible to give Anne the 3 eggs she asks for. You can keep more chickens, so the pacing and ranching's slower. You'll fill up all of your inventory space with chicken feed and have to go back for more every day. Same for the eggs. Playing this game reminded me, in both this game and the remake, bought sheep are already adults. The only reason you'd buy a sheep is if you think you can get a stocking in this game. You can in the remake, there's no proof that you can in this game. So I befriended Ellen for nothing. But if you know that, it saves you a lot of effort for 100% completion. Chickens increase in affection points faster than the other animals. But this doesn't matter because eggs that aren't golden or spa boiled will sell for 50G no matter what. One of the power berries is won from the swimming contest. That's absolutely piece of shit game design since it's luck-based as well as a painful button masher. The remake's not much better, tying its power berry to the frisbee contest instead. But at least that luck-based minigame doesn't hurt your hand. But at least this one you could actually get in the first year, if you're lucky. Having to balance between swimming and taking breaths is so unnecessary. If your stamina runs out, you're doomed. You're not told the reward for this is a power berry. Since 64, the courtesy to have its reward for the swimming festival be worthless so you didn't feel bad about not getting it. You might assume it's the same situation here, but it's still possible you won't. How many power berries in the remake suck? Just barely 3. Too bad both games force you to win the horse race for a power berry. Because the horse race is completely unplayable in this game. But I'll talk about that later. Oh no, you need to go the 19th level of the winter mine for one. The gameplay getting there doesn't suck, it's just boring from how long it takes. You'll have bought everything by that point, so spend the whole game without it. That's usually a problem with the latest power berries in a Harvest Moon game. It happens so much that I stopped mentioning it. So predictably, the remake wins. It turns out festivals don't have to cheat you out of ordering something you saw on TV. As long as you don't turn on the TV or examine the phone all week, then the next Saturday you can not only order that item, but also go all the way home and watch TV and order the item that's next. It's a really cool trick I only found out about as early as summer because I was reading the glitches section of a guide. Because in the summer you would be watching the weather report every day to try to escape the typhoons. Nothing bad happened to me when I did this in the summer. You might discover this in the fall or spring where the TV is only used for shopping really. But only if you think to watch the TV after ordering the item. So no. I took advantage of this twice in one save file because I knew about this. There's no financial difference between the 3 types of white eggs, but even with that, you still can't stack the different types. But they all look the same, which makes it confusing trying to get all the recipes. And combine that with the fact that you need a button press to tell what quality an egg is, and trying to put eggs in the fridge sucks. Why is he only offering me 1 maker? According to the guides, you can only have the option to buy 1 maker at a time, and each one after the mayo maker only unlocks after you bought the previous one. That's a downgrade. At least makers are a bit cheaper, but not enough. You're rich by the time you try to get them anyways. That's what makes this incredibly silly. That the game does this in a vain attempt at balance when I have enough money to get everything and I haven't harvested any sweet potatoes yet. It's clearly bad game design to make it impossible to get the best moneymakers until after you bought everything else. Music Festival is better because you can actually hear Karen singing in it. That's nice to look up on YouTube, but I'd never go to that normally because I don't make money from it. If I hadn't read about it, I never would have gotten the idea that I could hear her singing. One goes to your house offering you a blue feather for a rip-off price as soon as you get a girl to orange heart. thankfully it's offered much cheaper at the supermarket. But this shouldn't have been in the game because of all the people who bought this thinking it was the only way to get the feather, because of the supermarket being closed on that day. So one could say this before you got to see it there. That's the only reason this matters. Even if I hadn't seen in a guide that there's 2 ways of getting the blue feather and he swindles you, the sheer price of the blue feather compared to other games would have caused me to look up if there's another way to get it from sheer audacity because it's never been that mean. But what about anyone who didn't trust the game enough to do that? There's less heart events. And that means I can marry Mary without a guide because there's no heart event on the summit at a point where she's not supposed to be there. Though it is disappointing in the story sense, because you don't get to spend as much time with the person you're wooing. Getting a character to max affection is faster because the base gift-giving affection won't plummet to 0 after the first one. And for people you can marry, the base gift-giving affection won't decrease at all after the first one apparently. Obviously that's good, because walking all the way to a character with a gift is boring and doesn't make you any money. So I'd rather do that as little as possible. The real problem is, it's especially boring to try to max someone out in the first place. But you only know to do that if you looked up the game online. No one's gonna think to get more than 1 gift in a day because it never has any effect past the first game. Mary outright loved the herbs this time. There's no benefit to getting someone to red heart earlier because buying everything needed for marriage will take forever anyways. So why would I give her something that I can make money off of? You don't need to have ordered every kitchen utensil to be able to get married. So you can get married in the first year. Proposing is faster because you don't see a cutscene at your house because of it. She says something weird and agrees on the spot like in 64. Now if only they kept the thing from 64 where if you're taught a recipe by someone, it actually shows up in your recipe list. That would have made sense. Why does one keep telling me to buy a ball from him when I have one? There's literally nothing I can do to make him stop doing that. Just decrease the likelihood that he does it. It forces you to play with the dog ball every day at least once. So yeah, the gameplay loop is clearly better in the remake. The winery job lasts 6 whole days and is actually gameplay in this game, which is immersive but also annoying. One of the grapes is impossible to get if you don't get it as soon as you can. You won't search the vine in the upper right corner fast enough. It turns out you can get away with waiting until 4:30 before going there and still do the job. By this point in the game, I didn't need to make money anymore, so I only bothered with it for 1 day. So it sure is a good thing Cliff still stays in the town if you give up on this. One nitpick is that the grapes don't disappear as you collect them. That's not immersive. I thought it being immersive was the whole point. I say nitpick because it's pretty easy to remember which ones you collected. Also, it shows you handing him the grapes one at a time. Something Jeff tells you from the start is that a greenhouse is in this game. It's just like it was in 64. Unfortunately, that means it can be destroyed. Why was this thing taken out? Well, it doesn't matter because by the time you're even given the option to buy it, you already made enough money to buy everything. You can only get it after you bought everything else. So the only thing you end up using it for is making all the recipes faster. Pineapples alone are such a game breaker that the hothouse is overkill. And you can't just save anywhere you want like in the remake. So to avoid bad weather, you'd have to save at the end of the day, and then reload the file and redo an entire day if it turned out there was bad weather on the forecast. Even if you could get it right away, it's 30,000 gold and 580 lumber. The existence of this thing alone gave me a reason to try and make money in this game as hard as possible, because I already bought everything in the remake. The hothouse is smaller than it was in 64. Only 4 crop seeds at a time can be grown in it. The harvest sprites harvest stuff from the greenhouse too. I didn't expect that. In the original game, apparently there's a glitch where if you tell your wife to call you honey, she'll call you your name anyways. That's dumb since it's the most likely nickname you'll pick. But that's not the case in the PSP version. Another thing that's not the case. Apparently there's a glitch where if you use more than 8 letters for every name that you're told to pick out at the start of the game, you'll start the file every time you load it with 1 stamina. But it didn't happen for me on my second file. Your wife quits her job after marriage, so you can't go into the library anymore, which is completely unrealistic compared to 64, where of course there was a substitute librarian. It doesn't matter, but it is sad for her. If you married the character because you respected her for a job in the first place, then her quitting her job misses the point. And then there's not really a point to marrying her just because you respect her job, which would be the case for Ellie.